In the quest for making an early circa 1905 ball gown, I have gone back to the basics and started my research with the undergarments. Yes, ladies and gentlefolk, the people of the Edwardian era and periods long ago did not go skimping about in their dresses without some sort of shift or chemise. Women of this particular time were wearing now what we call a romper, but the romper that I speak of is the combinations, or pair of combinations. An undergarment that had bifurcated legs and was worn up until the late 1910s, when underwear became more of what we think of today. In my endeavor to recreate a pair of these combinations, I looked at the most iconic pair at the Met Museum in New York. This soon led me to realize that I would not have the funds to purchase all that wonderful insertion lace and thus needed an alternative. I went on the internet and stumbled across a book called Systems of Sewing and Garment Drafting by Margaret J. Blair. She was a seamstress from my own state, Minnesota, and wrote this book in 1904, the same time that this dress would have been made. The book consisted of how to draft and take measurements of all sorts of clothing items, from skirts to jackets to children's clothes, and it just so happened that it contained a pattern for drawers and chemises. A similar book that I had also referenced was Manual of Needlework and Cutting Out by Agnes Walker. The two were very similar in how the shape of the drawers was cut. I ultimately went with Walker's rendition as it had the full combinations pattern, not just the drawers. But I used the sewing techniques from Blair's book to make up for that, as Walker's book was written in the late 1800s and this book was written in the early 1900s. Once the patterns were found, it was time to get to work, and thus the sewing adventure began.
Hello, good day. Today is the 24th of May, and yesterday I got the bust bodice done, and now it is time to work on the underwear to wear before you put on the corset and everything. So that is the combinations that I'm going to be making. So that's the top. There's the back that goes to it as well. And this was really interesting to see that this is the shape of the back. So this is the back seam, and just it curves in so much, which is interesting because we don't necessarily today make, well, we don't make combinations and we don't make chemises or shifts or anything. Everything is done in, panties and bras. But even with outer garments today, we normally have a lot of garments that are put on the fold, and if there is a back seam, it's usually just a straight back seam, or there's a slight curve at the top and then it just goes straight down. But human backs are not straight. They're curved. They have a dip in the waist area, and then it curves around to go over the shoulder blades in the back. So it's just interesting to see that this curve is a lot more drastic on the undergarments than it is on the overgarments, but I digress. That's just the side seam. That'll match up to this side seam, so there's a more curved in line there. So all of this camisole, or at least this particular drawers pattern, was meant to really, fit close to the body. It wasn't meant to be extremely loose at the waistline, which makes sense if you're going to be wearing a corset and you don't want any more bulking than you need to happen at the waist. Okay, so we have a slight problem. One, the arms eye is a bit too tight, which is fine because I can easily go in and make this a little bit bigger and then clip into it and turn it in. So that's not a big issue. The problem is this is where it's closing on me right now. So the neckline is great. The neckline's actually really, really nice. It's actually pretty flattering for my figure. The problem is it should be connecting here and here, because this to the side seam is actually where the drawers should be. So I have all this, don't know how well that's going. So there's all this fullness in the back, which is perfectly, fine, but I don't have enough. Like that's where this, that seam right here that I'm tugging at is the side seam. That should technically be that should be under here. Hello, editing me coming in. This is just a sped up thing of me bumbling through what I was saying. Pretty much exactly what I'm talking about is the movement in the bum area is very nice to have, although I do believe there is something wrong with that. I don't think that's how the combinations are meant to go. I think I just misread the pattern and flipped stuff around for the overlap in the front. So that's what I'm going on about that, but the range of motion is nice to have. I have fixed the side and back problem, so now it'll be closed in the front nicely, and the next part that's coming up is me ironing some of the binding and getting that ready to finish up. The other thing that needed to happen in the front was a button stand that was just made out of some extra linen that I had, and the buttonholes were finished off with some silk twist thread to finish off the buttonholes.
After the combinations, the hip pad was next. This was found on the internet using the Google patent page. This page can easily be found by typing in Google patents, and a long list of patents from any time you want can be searched for. I used this to find the exact one Kathy Hay had used, as it looked easy enough to make and was from around the time period I was working in. The patent was submitted by one Charles H. Scott on October 17, 1901, and was granted on June 6, 1902, and published on the 10th. The patent, along with others, were not direct patterns for sewing. They left out key details on how to actually draft the real thing as to not have people steal the design fully. But Kathy Hay, being the clever mathematician she is, figured out how to make the pad. Using her video, I got the pattern for myself, and to see how she went about patterning it and to learn more about the maths, go visit her channel, link in the description. The pictures shown here are of the final layer being made, but the first two are made in the same way. The patent called for a layer made of a cotton sheet wadding so as to stretch over the body. That was then stuffed with whatever you had lying around the house: feathers, wadding, fabric scraps, hay, wool, whatever. That was then stitched up and stuffed. The second layer was a cotton of a light weight, and then a silk layer with ties added on. Then it was tufted to keep the stuffing in place and to curve over the body nicely. Once done, the pad was meant to sit under the corset to give a smooth silhouette to the wearer. With these two underpinnings done, it is now time to move on to the structural supports, the corset and the bust bodice. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for the rest of the series. I'll be going over the making process of the bust bodice, corset, under and overskirt, and the bodice. Please leave comments, as this will help with collecting data for my reflection process and share it over and over again with friends. Subscribe and ring the bell for notifications when the next videos come out, and have a wonderful time sewing.